I'll move quickly through the privacy stuff because it's not very glamorous. Oh, my PowerPoint got funny. Some of this is common sense, and it's things that you would have seen if you've already completed your volunteer standards of conduct. You know, it's making sure that you're keeping your conversation level low as you're talking with a tax preparer. You may end up with someone who's very hard of hearing, and so that will require you and the taxpayer both to be a little bit louder. Whenever possible, the site coordinator is going to have music on in the background so that at least there's some ambient noise to kind of keep things, to maintain a little bit of confidentiality, even if we can't maintain the actual privacy. Nobody is going to be doing income tax returns in a separate room. It's all going to be part of a group setting, and so we just adjust to do the best we can to protect taxpayer information. And so some of that is making sure that the room is set up so that you can't not oversee, but that you can't view somebody else's tax information. Here we're going to be in a computer lab, and so what will likely happen is some staggering of the stations so that you're not immediately behind somebody else and able to see them. The taxpayer is going to be facing you, not the screen, and so that will limit their ability to see what other taxpayers are doing. And then the most obvious piece, I think, is making sure that you never leave any taxpayer materials unattended. So when you, as the preparer, receive that packet of information, the intake form and everything that's contained within it, you're not going to get up from your computer station and leave that behind. If you need to ask a question of the site coordinator, if you need to take a bathroom break, you know, if you're just asking a question, take the materials with you when you go to pull Tom or Connie or whoever. If you need to duck out for a minute, drop it off either at the intake station or with Tom. But we always want to make sure that there's a volunteer who's handling those tax materials, not that they're just sitting out either for the taxpayer to rifle through or drop, or they're moving around the room. We want to keep that information in hand. In terms of, you know, some of the basic rules, we really do only want to ask for information that's necessary and relevant. So we're not going to be expecting anyone to volunteer a ton of information about their home life. Some of that might come out because it does pertain to their filing status, but you know, we only need to ask the questions that we need to know to make determinations. So always think, as you're having conversation with the taxpayer, is this something that I need to know for their tax return? Now, this doesn't preclude small talk, but be mindful of, as you're making small talk with the taxpayer, that it really is benign information, not related to their personal home life situation or anything that would be considered information that should be kept privately. Number 2, I can't stress enough. Never share information with someone who doesn't have a need to know. And I think where we all can easily fall prey to this is, you know, at the end of the day, we've had a real doozy of an appointment, and you want to commiserate with your fellow volunteers and say, oh my God, this woman, she brought in this and that and started pulling receipts, and I couldn't figure out what to do with her gambling winnings. You know, it's no matter how busy the site is, someone's going to be able to figure out who you're talking about, and that's not appropriate. So if there is a need for you to discuss it because you're not sure how to handle an aspect of the tax return, bring in another volunteer, bring in the site coordinator, that's okay. But in terms of just kind of venting at the end of the day, it's really not appropriate. And so, you know, it's true that we can run into some really challenging situations, but I understand the need to kind of vent and let that out. Never use details. So you can just say, you know, one of my appointments was a real challenge today. Gosh, I'm tired. I'm looking forward to going home. You know, whatever. But don't talk about the tax situation itself. Other ways that you're going to be able to protect privacy, don't ever share your TaxWise password. Now, because we're using a web-based program, you'll be able to access this information even when you're not at the tax site. And in some cases, you'll have a need to do that if you're preparing a return for a friend or a family member. We're not preventing you from logging into TaxWise when you're not at the site. It's being smart about what you're doing and when you're doing it. So if you are doing someone's return, if you're doing your neighbor's return for free, you don't want to give them your password and say, oh, you can just log in and do it yourself. You're still responsible for being the one who enters information into the software. Always, always, always log off TaxWise when you're done with your shift. Whether you're here or at one of our satellite sites using laptops, the computer that you sit at is not exclusively yours. And so you might not use the same computer the next time you're in. Computers, especially from Wapaka and Watoma, might move from site to site. And so logging out of TaxWise is as critical as logging out of the computer itself. Because we don't want someone jumping on and all of a sudden somebody's return pops up that they have never seen before. So make sure you're taking those measures. And when I say here for number 5, don't work on VITA returns, what that means is a customer that has come in. And so maybe you, at the end of the day, have this epiphany that, oh shoot, we forgot to check for the retirement savers credit. Don't log in at home and try and figure that out. Contact the site coordinator, let them determine what the next steps are in figuring that out, but that's not something for you to do at home. Friends and family is a different situation, but VITA tax clients, you should only be working on those returns when you're at the site. I have a handout here that gets into some more information. The IRS, unsurprisingly, puts out a very extensive publication about maintaining privacy and confidentiality. A lot of that spells out things like what we need to do as a sponsor for keeping inventory of equipment, things like that. It is not information for you to read. I have distilled the main points for you. And so the first 3 paragraphs there are the things that we've just talked about. What I want to talk about now is the consent forms that we use. There are cases where we want to use anonymous taxpayer information to report out about the program. And in order for us to do that, we have to obtain the taxpayer's signed consent. This is one of the trickier things that we do in terms of explaining it to the taxpayer, ensuring that they really understand, and getting their consent. I think it's just the nature of the work that we're doing. You know, taxes are intimidating to a lot of people, present company included. And so when we say to a taxpayer, oh, we want to be able to pull completely anonymous details from your return to talk about the impact of our program, all they hear is information from my return. And so it raises a red flag right away. And so we really do have to take the time to explain to them what information we're using and what we intend to do with it and how we will protect their privacy. And so having these signed consent forms is a requirement of the IRS, but how we present those is important in terms of the way we operate our program. So you can see what we're going to have is a 2-sided form. So under consent requirements, the bold there, we have to provide them with written notice, and they have to sign both. So you'll see that the language is going to look really similar in the 2, but they will have to sign both sides of that form. And we use this form because there is a section at the bottom of required IRS language. This is the legalese, and so we include that at the bottom of every consent, but what you're seeing here is the language that we actually are able to customize. And so we've tried to put it into clearer language about what we plan to use the information for. So we pledge that we're going to keep their information secure and that we will never share the personally identifying information with anyone. And what we ask them to consent is that we can use their information. We can populate a computer file that, again, doesn't have any personal information, but does say taxpayer 1, head of household, income level is this, credits they received was that. And then we've got this running database of all of the people that we serve, and so we're able to figure out, oh, we had, out of our 750 taxpayers, we had 600 who qualified for the earned income tax credit. That's great.
So if they don't consent, then we can't help them prepare their taxes, correct?
False.
All right.
Completely false.
Okay.
And that's a great question. Their consent is not a condition for us to do their return. And so actually, we will go over this at the quality review process. So we're not doing the consents up front. We're waiting until their return is prepared, done, and then we're able to say to them, okay, here's everything that's complete. We would like to be able to use and disclose anonymous data from your return, and we'll give them a copy of the consent and explain how we use it. If somebody says, oh, here's another piece of paperwork where I'm signing my life away, you'll get those snarky folks who are really kind of angry about it. That would be the point at which I would say, look, you don't have to do this. It's great for us to be able to talk about the benefits of our program, but if you're truly not comfortable, we're still able to file your tax return today. And then the difference between using and disclosing is explained in that handout. This really is about the use. So anything that we do that's in a file or on a computer document, that's use. As soon as we share it externally, that's disclosure. The disclosure document, what we promise to the taxpayer remains the same, but what they would agree to in terms of disclosure is that they'll allow us to take the information, the anonymous information that we have, include it in a group report of everyone that we've served, and be able to use it in our marketing materials and in the submission of funding applications. And one of the things that we have to hopefully provide a little bit of assurance to them is, and this is an old one, but we'll have a sample handout that shows, hey, this is the achievements of our program. And if they look at it, they'll be able to see all we've listed is the number of taxpayers that we've served. So in 2014, we helped 218 taxpayers get the earned income tax credit. And we talk about the total value of that credit. So that paragraph has no information about the type of taxpayer, where they live, who they are. I mean, we've scrubbed this as cleanly as we can, but we want to be able to talk about that. Earned income tax credit is one of the most important pieces of what we do. And so we really hope that they'll give us their permission. You can see that we also reference the homestead credit and how many people we're able to help. But most importantly, we want to be able to say, here's how much we saved people in tax preparation fees, and here's how much we got them back in refunds. I mean, having over $1 million in refunds is pretty impressive. And if we can't talk about that, it's a disservice to our program, I think. So we will always put out information only from those people who have given us their consent. And so what you'll do is you'll take these taxpayer consents, actually enter them in TaxWise. So this is where you will enter it in TaxWise. There's a preparer use form. And so you'll take that consent form, and if they've answered yes to using the information, it's a drop down, yes or no. If they've given their consent to disclose it, you'll select yes or no. The important thing for you to remember is that we need their affirmative consent. And so that means each checkbox needs to be marked. If they only check one, you're going to default to no when you enter the information in TaxWise. And these documents are going to be maintained by the site